The Rogue One review, Marcus Blake, Alex Moore, and Brendan Smith. All right, well, we got to talk about it. I mean, I know we're still like in awe about how great it was, still that, in that fanboy mode, but we do have to get serious about this review and things we liked and things we don't like. But I'll start with this. Overall, one of the best Star Wars films ever made. Absolutely. And if you're going to do a prequel to the beginning of the original trilogy, this is probably the perfect way to do it.
And just to clarify, no Bothans died. That's the wrong Star. That's the wrong Death Star. So please don't ask that question.
Right. The Bothans didn't die in this one. That's for Return of the Jedi. For me, I only had a couple of issues with it. First of all, the pacing at the beginning of the movie. I liked how they opened it up, but it takes getting used to. Yes, we're going to spoil it. There is no Star Wars crawl, so you don't have that kind of pacing that you're used to in a Star Wars movie. But it just kind of choppy right at the beginning until they kind of get going to Jedi or whatever the planet was called. Yeah.
I kind of wish that I didn't stop and take notes. If I'd known there was going to be a sequence where they were going to flash about 6 different planets and locations in about 5 minutes, I would have written them all down. So
it's like they were trying to cram a lot in the beginning because they knew what the rest of the movie is going to be. So I do have to kind of take issue with that but once it settled down and once you got on that planet near the temple for the Kyber temple, everything just flowed evenly after that, but that alone, I can't give it a perfect 10, but I understand why they did what they did and why they're trying to put as much information as they can in that, at the beginning of the movie. But the way they opened it up with Galen Erso and all that, and then they immediately jumped to, the Rogue One scene, even though it's not a trailer. I mean, that was actually kind of cool. And this is the first of my favorite Easter eggs in the movie. The blue milk in the building. I want some blue milk now. But that's my major issue. What about you, Alex?
Well, there's some things that I think of as being issues, but they could be things that when we look back on them, we may not look at on them as being bad things. For starters, with the CGI, the effects, I mean, it's like they look really great now, but 10 years from now, how are they going to look? But then I think to myself, you know what? There's some horror films where they're 20 or 30 years old, and they looked good at the time and look terrible now, but if it's the right kind of cheesy, where it captures you in the right moment, where it's a movie that you think fondly of, you don't look back on it as badly. You think, that's so bad that it's good.
Ironically, though, I thought they did, well, maybe not so ironic, because they probably just put more effort into it, but they did a much better job with the one character that was on screen a lot longer. Yeah. It was a more believable character, and I'm not going to say which characters they are.
Right.
But the one character at the end I thought was an unnecessary fan service, and I'm the biggest fanboy of Star Wars you'll find.
Well,
I think they could have much easily. There was another character in the movie who we all know, and who could have easily been the person they gave the plans to, and then he could have handed them off later in between Rogue One and the beginning of A New Hope. And I think that would have been better.
And we all knew who it was.
Yeah.
We didn't really need to see the reveal.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
I mean, it was nifty, but
I think that's the Disney version of doing things is you have to pay so much lip service to the fans to make them happy with Star Wars that...
you could have given it. You could have had somebody dressed up as her, turned around, and then given it to Vader,
sure,
and then not have her never turned around.
Right. Now we're not going to tell you who it is. We're not going to mention the name, but every Star Wars fan listening to this review knows who we're talking about anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great to have that connection. So I mean, Rogue One literally, ends right where Episode 4 is going to pick up.
It reminds me of how Tom Clancy ended Dead of Honor and then opened up Executive Orders. At the end of Dead of Honor, Jack Ryan's staring out the window of the CNN building, looking at the Capitol in flames, and at the very first line of Executive Orders is, and Jack turned around from the window.
Right.
So, it was very, to me, reminiscent of that. And any time you can be reminiscent of Tom Clancy and not do it poorly is a good thing.
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I mean, it is.
We're nitpicking because it was a great film.
Right. We don't want to be the typical fanboys that are just going to tell you that it's a perfect 10 across the board. And I think some of the fanboys out there have done that without really logically
Although
looking at it.
there is one scene at the end that is going to give any fanboy a stiffy that could contorts this like a lightsaber. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, it was one of those things where in my mind I was thinking that was brilliant. That was just perfect. That was like
that's all the fan service you needed.
Are we talking about Vader here?
Come on. What am I going to say? I figured it out.
I'm not going to give away what happened. I'm just saying that. I mean, let's talk about it for what it was.
That's all the fan service I needed. I was satiated at that point.
Right. I was going to be very disappointed if we only had one scene with him in the movie.
Yeah.
And fun. And you know what? That's okay because it was a great scene.
But you know what I liked about that one scene that you're referring to is it showed like not so much through the prequels, but through the Clone Wars and even now into Rebels.
Right.
You got to see a more wisecracking, wise-ass side of Anakin Skywalker.
Right.
And I do like that shown through, albeit in a very evil and scary way.
Very Bond-like,
villain-like, yeah.
Which I love. I'm not going to complain about that
It was
at
a
all.
nice little shot, and it was just like I love that little.
Perfect, yeah.
You know, it was like that little parting shot that that repartee that he built up between him and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka in the Clone Wars. So, yeah, I really enjoyed that. I thought the writing for it was great, and to have James Earl Jones, whoever had the brilliant idea of building a voice studio in his home so he can continue to do, work for Rebels and this, I pay that man whatever he's worth.
Right. Well, and the other great nod too is, we've only seen so many scenes of Vader outside of the mask. I mean, we got to see him right after when they were putting him together, and then there's the headshot in Empire. But to see him kind of half body, I'm going to give that away. There's a great little scene at that in the beginning where you kind of see what he has become more than just the head.
They have him in
20 years later.
20 years later, he's still taking baths in a Bacta tank.
Does anybody else what we saw in another later installment with another character that he's related to? Very similar, that shot.
Well, right. You're talking about Luke in
Empire Strikes Back.
Right. All right. So, two things that we have to mention. First, as much as we can criticize motion capture about the character we're talking about at the end, whoever they found to play Governor Tarkin, and we need to do some more research on him before Monday, spot on.
Yeah. The voice was really good.
Wow. I mean, he just like Ewan McGregor worked hard to get the mannerisms and the voice down for Obi-Wan in the prequels. This guy, incredible.
Yeah, I think most of the face is CGI, but...
Well, maybe, but...
Yeah, it is. I mean, I can tell, but the voice, whoever they got to do the voice,
exactly,
did a fantastic job. And there were some really nice little. They stole a little bit of footage from previous movies. And there was a really little nice, Rogue Red Leader, Gold Leader throwbacks there.
Right.
That was really good.
Red Leader was one of my favorites. Always
like
the dude with the southern accent.
And then so that was really cool. For you Rebels fans out there, I'm not going to give it away, but there's a really neat little Easter egg if you're paying attention.
Yes.
So you'll catch it. If you're not, well, you can PM me on Facebook and I'll tell you later. One of the things I did kind of take issue with is from the trailers, it seemed like Forrest Whitaker's character, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, a little bit better, a little bit more feisty, and this high pitch, and I understand it's that way because he's dying. Right. But it did kind of wear thin towards the end. I mean, great character and great usage of him.
Well, do you know who the character is?
Well, I forget the name. That's
Saw Gerrera.
Right.
He's from the Clone Wars.
Right, and I understand that. I'm just saying that you kind of think there's going to be a lot more with him from the trailer. And there is a lot, but at the same time, it's just kind of the way that he ends. It's like...
Yeah, they talk about there's actually a lot of stuff from the trailer that ended up on the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
I noticed that.
I have to say I'm not all that disappointed because it was wearing on my nerves as well, and I thought it was a bit over the top.
Right. He served his purpose, did what he did. It was a great little segue of getting the characters on to where they needed to go. But one of the things that we mentioned as we were walking out of the theater is Rogue One is very much the Alamo for the Rebellion. That's what it is, and I think
we have to give you credit for that little comparison. Is really one who-
and not so
it's a
much
good
as
one.
they're
Yeah.
so much as they're not a direct analogy. They're defending a base. It's not they're defending Yavin 4.
Right.
That's more A New Hope. But it's the one defining moment that galvanizes the rebellion.
Right, and that's for you Texas fans out there. That's what does it in Texas history.
Yep.
That's why it's a neat analogy, and you hear so many references toward the Alamo. Well, I mean, Saving Private Ryan, with the get across the bridge, below the bridge. That's the Alamo.
Yeah.
You know, it's these characters.
You may all go to hell, and we will go to Scarif.
The fact that these characters know that they're all probably going to die and they're going to do it anyway. I mean, I'm glad, without giving hardly anything away, and I think most people are expecting that. This shouldn't be a movie where everybody escapes death. They should be the heroes that sacrifice themselves for the greater cause. Especially your main character, who is cynical and doesn't care, but finds her rebellion spirit along the way. Okay.
Yeah, it would have been a real cop-out had everybody survived.
Oh yeah.
And I thought it was
for some of the complaints that we had about the Force Awakens, where they kind of copped out on things or serviced the fans way too much.
Yeah.
I think they fixed it with this one, because it is a dark movie. You know what you're going to get, but you still get all the things that you love about Star Wars. It very much is a Star Wars movie, but it very much feels more like Empire Strikes Back than anything else.
Yeah, and of the new characters that were established in this film, Donnie Yen and Alan Tudyk stole the show. K2SO and Cherry, I mean, they just stole the show.
Okay, I want one thing. Before it's all said and done, before Disney does everything else, Donnie Yen needs to make an appearance as a Force ghost. Come on.
Give him that.
Yeah.
And there was some cheesiness with
have the rebels go to Jeddah at some point on Star Wars Rebels and meet the two of them.
Right.
Call back.
Right, and that's something that you can very easily do. One of the great things too is if you watch Rebels and you see how everything is really beginning with the rebellion, and then you kind of get to this point. I know that where they are in Rebels compared to this movie, you're still a few years away.
About 2, yeah.
Right, but you're seeing the building blocks. Also, one great nod. Thank you for bringing Jimmy Smits back to play Bail Organa.
Absolutely.
And to give him more than one scene.
Yeah.
And to give us a nod of what his plans are going to do.
Yeah.
Because, trust me, once you see this movie, that's officially the last scene you will ever see Bail Organa. Because we all know what's about to happen next.
Yeah, it's about to get a little hot on Alderaan.
Now, I want to
This
also...
is the Clone Wars too, just like we heard in episode 4.
Yeah. Now, I also want to point this out. The Death Star is so menacing when they talk about it in episode 4, but it only does destroys one real planet. You get to see it destroy more in this movie to really. So I think if you watch,
and what I thought was interesting too is how they could just dial up a little bit of power if they wanted to.
Right.
We're not gonna destroy the whole planet. We're just gonna take out a city or a continent.
Also, well,
you got to see new perspective
2 points.
Too, though.
If you watch this as the build up to episode 4, and I think we're all going to be doing that from now on,
right.
Okay, and how it leads into it, you really understand fully what the Death Star really is. I mean, we know it's menacing in episode 4, but again, it only does one thing. Now you know why it's menacing. And as you talk about dialing, just having a little bit of power and destroying one city at a time, I appreciate the nod to American history and the atomic bomb and how it explodes and expands and engulfs. But it also leads to one of the most beautiful cinematic scenes at the end of this movie too.
Yeah.
Without our characters getting the cop out of escaping. And once you see Rogue One, you know what I will talk about. One other thing I want to mention is for Diego Luna, we did have a chance to meet him at the Dallas Film Festival this past year. Now that we've seen this movie, next time we see you, we've got you are officially allowed to talk about Star Wars now. We have so many questions.
One other quick little
Sure.
thing. There's a little ramming maneuver performed at one point.
Yes.
And if those who are fans of Knights of the Old Republic or Star Wars The Old Republic are going to love it, because you're going to recognize that ship.
Overall, great movie. Personally, I am not going to give it a perfect 10, like I said, but I will definitely give this a 9 out of 10. Probably a 9.5 if we did it that way, but I will leave it at a 9. How about you, Alex?
Oh man, you're making this tough for me. You know, there were moments of that movie where I was thinking, well, I think this is a little bit overdone, perhaps. I'm not sure if I like that, but I'd tell you the parts that I really liked about this movie, I liked a lot more than the things I liked in Episode 7. And I gave that movie an 8, so I know I can't give it anything lower than an 8. I'm not sure if I can go a 9. So, like you were saying, if we could go sort of in a halfway between maybe an 8.5.
So right on the cusp there.
Something
Okay.
around that.
All right.
What I like, I also want to say one thing I liked about this the most. I thought it was probably the most emotional of the Star Wars films, and they were able to do it within one film. You know, it wasn't like where we needed Episode 4 to make Episode 5 more meaningful.
Well, when you are talking about
more meaningful within
the building
episode.
blocks of the rebellion, you know, I don't think it gets that emotional really until the end, where Luke pulls his dad's mask off and has that conversation with him. You know,
and I enjoyed those moments, in the certain moments in the film, and didn't find myself saying, "Oh, this is silly," like in Episode 2 or 3. So.
Right. How about you, Brendan?
I think I only gave TFA a 7, so I can't remember offhand. But
well, I think you gave it an 8 because everybody rounded it out. It rounded out to like an 8.5, 9. But
there were a few things I didn't like, but like I said, nitpicking. Yeah, this one I'm going to have to go at 9 because it's my favorite Star Wars movie since 4 and 5.
Right.
Oh.
So.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think about an average 8.5 to a 9. I think that is fair to say.
I have to say it's going to be really fun.
I just would like to say this to plead to Kathleen Kennedy. Look, we get that they're the anthology stories. We get they're not part of the Skywalker saga, but can we go back to the opening crawl in the regular freaking graphics, please? It's still Star Wars. I want my crawl gun.
Yeah,
Okay, I get what you're trying to do, but we already know it's not part of the Skywalker saga, and if you don't know it's not part of the Skywalker saga, then probably not having the crawl confused you more.
Well, and I'll to add more to that point, yes, the Star Wars crawl for Episode 4 pretty much explains what this movie is, but so really, yes, you could have used that twice, and I would have been okay with it. But you're right. It is Star Wars.
That's like not having the gun barrel sequence at the beginning of a Bond film. You can't do it.
Right.